Once you've created a project, all project-specific settings are found in the Project Settings window. To open the Project Settings window, just click the gear button at the bottom right on any page. The project settings open in the middle of the screen, divided into a series of panels which can be selected from a sidebar to the left. Each panel contains a collection of related settings that affect some category of DaVinci Resolve functionality. To open a panel of settings, simply click its name in the sidebar at the left. The master settings define the principal attributes of a project, such as the timeline resolution, timeline frame rate, color science, and bit depth. Image scaling settings define how clips that don't match the timeline resolution are scaled to fit. There are other panels for color management, camera raw, capture and playback, etc. Master settings. This panel is project-specific and lets you set up and adjust the most essential properties of the timelines in your project, including the timeline format, video monitoring method, and conform options. In many workflows, you'll want to adjust these settings before getting started with your project. By default, all timelines use these project-wide settings. However, you can optionally create timelines with individual format, monitoring, and output sizing settings. However, if you change a timeline to use basic settings, then that timeline will mirror the project-wide options that are selected in the project settings. Timeline resolution, a drop-down menu that lets you choose a frame resolution preset to use for image processing while grading. DaVinci Resolve is resolution independent, so you can change the resolution at any time and all windows, tracks, sizing changes, and keyframe data will be automatically recalculated to fit the new size. For example, you can work on a 4K project while monitoring at HD resolutions if your room is only set up with an HD monitor, and then render the finished project at 4K resolution for final delivery. Alternately, you can downsize an HD project to an SD resolution to create another set of deliverables. Use vertical resolution. This checkbox swaps the horizontal and vertical pixels of the timeline resolution. This lets you format your timeline vertically for display on smartphones, tablets, or televisions that are in an upright configuration for digital signage. Pixel aspect ratio, used to select par settings for image formats that don't use the default square pixel format. You can apply a 16:9 anamorphic par, a 4:3 par for SD projects, or a cinemascope ratio. Timeline frame rate determines the primary frame rate used by the project. A variety of standard and high frame rate (HFR) settings are available. If you're importing an AAF or XML file, this setting is automatically set via an option in the Project Import dialog. Ideally, you should choose a frame rate before importing media into the media pool. However, the first time you import media into an empty media pool, you're prompted if the incoming media frame rate doesn't match the timeline frame rate set here, and you have the option of automatically updating this setting to match that of the media you're importing. Once one or more files have been added to the media pool, this setting cannot be changed. Use drop frame timecode, enables or disables drop frame timecode for the current project. Enable interlace processing. Interlaced media is supported throughout DaVinci Resolve. The Enable Interlace Processing checkbox forces DaVinci Resolve to process all operations internally using separated fields, in order to properly maintain the field integrity of interlaced clips in your program. In addition, each clip in the media pool has a field dominance drop-down menu in the video panel of the Clip Attributes window that lets you specify whether clips are upper or lower field dominant. An auto setting makes this choice by default. There is also a corresponding checkbox in the Render Settings panel of the Deliver page. There are two instances where you want to leave this setting turned off. If you're working with progressive frame media, it is not necessary to turn this checkbox on. Doing so will unnecessarily increase processing time. If you're using interlaced clips in a progressive frame project and you're intending to deinterlace those clips using the Enable Deinterlacing checkbox in the Clip Attributes window, then you must keep Enable Video Field Processing off. Otherwise, the Enable Deinterlacing checkbox will be disabled for all clips. Named Field Rendering, that lets you enable and disable field rendering when you're rendering file-based output. Playback frame rate usually mirrors the frame rate selected in the video format setting in the video monitoring section below, which is typically based on the frame rate of the external display that's connected to your video interface, given the TimeLine frame rate setting. For example, a 50 Hz monitor requires a 25 frames per second playback frame rate for synchronous display without dropped frames. If you want to monitor playback at a slower frame rate, type the frame rate of your choice in this field and DaVinci Resolve will make the appropriate calculations to drop or repeat frames as necessary to match it. This can be useful for temporarily seeing how clips look in slow motion,